You're listening to Project Management Paradise, the ultimate project management podcast.
Hello again and welcome to Project Management Paradise. Johnny Byrne here, and this podcast delivers real project management insights from experts around the world. Today's topic for discussion is entitled Enabling People, Enabling Projects with Pauline Stewart Long. Pauline has over 20 years' experience in project and portfolio management in various roles, including VP of Global Project Management for Glaxo Smith Kline. Pauline is also Director and Chairperson of the Pharma Industry Project Management Group. Hello, Pauline, and welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Johnny. Nice to be here.
Thanks very much for your time. We all say we're a little bit time poor these days, so we're very appreciative of your time. I know you're quite busy.
That's okay. No, I enjoy doing this type of thing.
Great. Just for our listeners, Pauline, can you give us a little bit of information about your background?
Okay. Well, originally, I guess I'm a scientist. My degree was in nutrition. I did a PhD in biochemical nutrition. And then I moved into clinical research in the pharmaceutical industry. I decided that academia really wasn't for me. I enjoyed working more in teams and with people. So that role within clinical research really suited me. And I enjoyed it. And I did that for about 10 years. I then moved into project management. And I made that move into project management because I was really curious about what happened in the rest of the industry or the rest of the company. I felt very isolated in my bit, but there's an awful lot more to pharmaceuticals and developing new medicines for patients than actually just doing the clinical studies. So I was able to have a secondment into project management and discovered that I really loved it. I loved the role. And then I made the permanent move. So I moved into project management and stayed as a project manager for about another 10 years. Then moved into portfolio management, which was another exciting challenge and looking at a whole portfolio of projects. But at that time within pharmaceuticals, there was a limit as to how far we could go with the portfolio management. So I actually then moved back into project management and headed up a group to try and improve the maturity of project management, so that would then enable an improvement in portfolio management.
And what was it about project management that, because I can hear the passion coming through there for it, what is it that you love about project management?
According to my husband, it's because I like bossing people around, but that's not strictly true. I enjoy working with people, and project management is very much around working with people and teams and trying to coordinate things so that, a team can deliver and a team can be successful. It's very interactive. It's just an exciting place to be. And no project is the same. You get a lot of variety when you're working in project management, which again is something that appeals to me.
And how does it vary then with portfolio management?
Portfolio management is more strategic in a way, and it's really around balancing those projects. And I enjoyed it particularly working in early development because there's a lot of uncertainty in life sciences. The science, you're never quite sure which project is going to succeed and which one's going to fail. And part of the challenge is being able to pick the ones that are going to win, put the resources into those, but also develop the studies and the projects where you can make a clear decision early to stop the projects that aren't going to succeed. And in portfolio management, there's a balance, and it's really interesting to try and balance that portfolio of projects. So you've got some which are sure winners, and you've got some that are much more risky but are potentially much more valuable to the patient should they get there. So it's having that balance within the company and understanding the risk appetite within the company and trying to predict which ones are going to succeed and which ones aren't, and balancing how you're going to spend the budget, because you have to take a few guesses on where things are going to stop, that you are going to save money, and so you can put it onto the other one. So it's quite different from working just on a project, but it's interesting.
And the industry itself then, of course, is, projects that are high risk, and I guess is a contrast with a lot of other industries and projects where they're pretty much sure of the project's success within reason. Is that fair?
I think that is fair. And when I first moved into project management in pharmaceuticals, there was this feel that pharmaceutical project management was different, that pharmaceuticals were special because our projects were different, because they were long-term projects. So you're looking at 10 years to develop a new medicine. And it's a highly regulated industry, and there's a lot of attrition. But in reality, yes, we're different from construction, for example, because if you decide you're going to build a bridge, you end up with a bridge, and you're fairly certain that when you start the project, you're going to finish it. So in that respect, it's different. But there are also a lot of other industries that do have high attrition rates and are regulated. Aerospace, for example, have very long projects to develop a new aeroplane, and it is highly regulated. So there are a lot of similarities. I don't think pharmaceuticals is as special as perhaps the industry used to think it was, but it is in that kind of that R&D regulated long projects. So it is slightly different from some areas of project management, definitely.
And you're involved in the PIPMG. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I am, yes. The PIPMG is the Pharmaceutical Industry Project Management Group. And it was founded back in the mid-80s, about 85 I think it was, by some 6 key UK pharmaceutical companies. So Beecham's, Phison's, Glaxo, ICI, Smith Kline and French, Roche, Syntex and Wellcome. Now, you probably realise that most of those companies don't exist anymore. And in fact, Beecham's, Glaxo, Smith Kline, French and Wellcome all merged into one. So Glaxo Smith Kline is actually a result of all of those. Phison's and ICI merged. There's been lots of mergers. But it started because back in the 80s, project management was relatively new in pharmaceuticals. It had existed in engineering and construction, and that was really where project management developed. But in pharmaceuticals, particularly in the R&D aspects, it was very new. So the people that were being asked to be project managers were generally not formally trained, and they'd moved into that role from other things. So the PIPMG came out of a meeting from the Association of Information Officers in Pharmaceutical Industry, because there were people that were taking on project management work alongside other roles, and there was this shared interest to find out how others were doing it and responding to this new challenge, if you like, of project management. So it started from there very much as a small networking group for sharing best practices. And over the years since then, it's had its ups and downs, but it has grown. And today, a lot of companies are involved, a lot of smaller companies now, not just the big pharma, a lot of smaller biotechs, a lot of contract research organisations, contract manufacturing organisations, and those other parts of the life sciences industry. But so PIPMG is kind of developed because there's still a need for project managers to talk and network and to share best practices.
And that's the key benefit then. If I was to ask a member why are they involved, what would they say?
I think they would say it's the networking opportunities and it's the sharing of best practices, but with an understanding of the industry that they're in. I think it's very valuable to go to cross-industry meetings and to understand how project management is applied in other industries, and you can learn an awful lot from that. And I've always encouraged my project managers to do that. But I think sometimes, and particularly for newer people moving into project management in pharmaceuticals, it's really nice to be able to talk about your problems around risk management or scheduling or estimating or what have you with people that understand the business that you're in. And that seems to be what people particularly like. So we run meetings and we get speakers in to talk about things, and we have a lot of workshops within our meetings to enable people to discuss and to learn from each other. And that seems to be really well received by our membership. It's a voluntary organisation. We're not for profit. It's run by volunteers. But, we do have, about 1,000 members, I think it is.
Wow.
And they come along to about, not everybody comes to every meeting by any means. They tend to be quite small and intimate. But I think it is providing something that's very useful for project managers to be able to talk quite quite comfortably about their challenges and sometimes to get the reassurance that the things that they're struggling with, other people are struggling with, but also to get some ideas from other people.
Okay. And in terms of project management then, if somebody was to say to you, isn't it just common sense? What would your answer be, or your reply, I should say, to such a bold statement?
I have had people that have said that to me, and to some extent it's true, but it kind of depends on your individual level of common sense. And I think project management, there are people that try and make it much more complicated than it is. And one of the things that I always say about project management is it's really about the right people having the right conversations at the right time. And that's basically, if you do that, you don't need really complicated systems. You don't need this huge technology. You don't need a formal methodology. That being said, and I'm sure some of the listeners may be cringing when I say these things, those things are very useful to support what you need to do. And particularly if you're on big projects, if you're on very complex projects, then you do need some tools to be able to manage them. You do need a methodology so that you can compare across projects, particularly when you get into portfolios. But fundamentally, to manage a project, you just need the right people talking to each other about the right things. And we all do projects in our day-to-day life. If we're planning to go on holiday or we're planning to redecorate our house, we inherently think about what we need to do, what order we need to do it in, who's going to do it, what are the resources, can we afford to do it? We inherently do those basic project management things. So to some extent it is common sense, but it's just that when you get into the bigger and more complex projects, then it's a bit beyond that.
Okay, so with scale comes complexity?
Yes, I think that's true. The bigger the project, the more uncertainty, the risks around it, the costs and everything. Yeah, there's definitely much more uncertainty and risks. Things can go wrong.
Okay, because I'm intrigued. If you're doing the little things right, then just more of them.
Yes, it is doing more of them. I guess our brains have only a certain capacity, and doing more of them, you can't hold everything in your head. I mean, if you're working on a project, if you actually do a schedule and you've got hundreds and hundreds of activities in there, and you've got resources around the world, different departments and what have you, that's when it gets complex, and you need tools and you need processes to help you manage that. So yes, the fundamentals are common sense, but yeah, big projects can be very complex and very difficult to manage and to keep a grasp of, to make them deliver on time and effectively. Okay,
so in terms of interpersonal skills versus technical, it starts with interpersonal, would you say, or a good combination of 50-50 interpersonal and technical, or what's your thoughts on that?
I think the interpersonal skills are particularly important, and I think that's what differentiates between a good project manager and a great project manager. When I've been recruiting project managers, I often get people coming along and say, I've done my training, I've got my PMP certification, and I know about the business. And I go, okay, well, that's well and good, but I'm really interested in how you can relate to the team that you're going to have to work with. So what are those personal skills, interpersonal skills? I often say, I can teach the technical skills. So somebody comes along who, in my business, who's a scientist, who has an interest in project management, but they don't have any of those technical skills, I can teach them. They need to have an understanding of business as to what the industry is trying to deliver, which is not to say that you can't have a really good project manager that comes in from another industry. But again, you can enhance that, you can learn more about it. The third thing that I look for when I'm recruiting project managers is the interpersonal skills. And I believe that those are inherent in a person. You can enhance them and you can support them and you can develop them. But if somebody doesn't have that inherent skills, that emotional intelligence, that ability to talk to people and to listen to people, those communication skills, then if they don't inherently have some of those skills, they're not going to make a great project manager.
And how, for example, would you assess that those skills exist?
It's really difficult, and I must admit I have made the odd mistake when I've been recruiting because I've made assumptions. But it's really around talking to people and finding out what they've done. And it doesn't mean that they have to have done it as a project manager, but it's their experience, it's how they've dealt with the difficult situations, because you always get them on projects. Things will go wrong. Stuff happens on projects. It's how you deal with them. So people can always share experiences, which could be in a work environment or it could be outside of work. And that's how you get a feel for how people can cope with things, how they can cope with the difficulties, how they can influence people, how they can negotiate. It's all those sorts of skills. You get a gut feel for it.
And what technical skills then would you look for?
The technical skills, it's around having a logical approach. Project management is pretty logical, and that's why scientists are often quite good as project managers from the logical side of things, so long as they've got the people skills to go with it. There is a piece around being systematic about things, so there's some technical skills there, and then there's the IT ability, so to be able to use the various tools, whether it's MS Project or any other software, but it is being IT literate, and it's being able to sort of the ability to kind of follow up on things, to be logic, to work to time. It's those sorts of things. But specific tools, there's a lot of them out there, and they're extremely valuable, whether you're using a standalone tool and Excel, or whether you're in a big enterprise system, so that things can be rolled up for portfolio reporting and whatnot. But it is around that logical approach to using the technology and understanding that it's there to help. I have had project managers that have spent their time at the computer and they think that is managing a project, and I'd say to them, no, get up and go out and talk to your team members, because you really find out what's happening at the coffee machine. When you really understand as to what their issues are with the project. If you send them an email, you'll get a bland response. So it's linking what you hear about the project and then being able to put it into the plan and to update the plan and to use the tools. So the tools are there to help. They're not the be-all and end-all.
Yeah, a great definition I heard before for brand is your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room.
Yes.
And I guess it can be similar with projects. When you mentioned the coffee machine, is like what's actually going on is said when potentially some of the stakeholders aren't in the room.
Absolutely. There's nothing worse than having senior management coming into a project meeting to actually squash down the conversation. And often it's because, people are concerned, and so many times I've come across somebody on a project team member who's really worried about issues they've got within their functional space, that something might be delayed. And sometimes those individuals don't have the fuller context that the project managers had. And, you have a conversation with them and they're really worried, and the project manager can say, well, look, it's okay. You're not on the critical path. If you slip by a little bit, it doesn't have any impact on anybody else. Which can be a huge relief to somebody on the team who hasn't understood that bit. Or equally, they can say to somebody, ooh, we really do have a problem here because that's going to impact that function over there. Let me see what I can do. Get the right people together. We can have a conversation. Maybe they can start a bit of work at risk or what have you. So the project management is that kind of honest broker in the middle. And unless they've developed a really good, open and honest working relationship with the people on the team, they're not going to hear about these things until it's too late, when they can't do anything about it. And that's why projects go over time and over budget. So
ideally you're suggesting that it'd be great if the coffee machine conversation would happen at the actual project management meetings.
Yeah, and it can do. And if a team has been working together for some time and they've had the ability to really get to know each other and develop that trust, and it is all about trust, that there is that openness, it can happen within project team meetings. And the really high-performing teams have that level of trust and openness, because they're all there with a common aim. It's all around the project and delivering the project, as opposed to individual egos and what have you. But, a high-performing team has to be, they have to kind of grow, they have to go through those phases to develop into that. And putting on paper would seem to be the best people together in a room doesn't necessarily make a high-performing team, because they have to be able to work together.
And in your experience, have you used any team building techniques pre-project, or have seen companies use them? Or
Absolutely. And within pharmaceuticals in particular, a lot of companies have got, they're well spread around the globe. So you end up with global teams, and many of the meetings have to be virtual. So they use Skype, they use telephones, they use video conferencing, and you don't get that same interaction that way. The best teams are where the company supports that initial team kickoff and the ability for the team to spend face-to-face time together, ideally with some help from whether it's HR groups or operational effectiveness groups or what have you, can come in and help the team to work out how they're going to work together, how they're going to communicate to each other, have a bit of fun with each other, get to know each other personally. And I've been involved latterly since I've been freelance, actually working with teams in various companies to help them do this. And, getting that agreement about what everybody's role is, what they contribute to the team, what they need from other people. And if you spend a good bit of time doing that initially, the people start to gel together, which means then when they're communicating virtually over telephones and whatnot, it's a much higher quality communication that can go on thereafter.
Because essentially they may never actually physically meet.
They may not after that, yes. And the problem at the moment is that where companies are cutting back on their budgets, and, if we go into recession, this is going to get worse. One of the first thing that goes is travel budgets, which is understandable. But I would argue strongly that for a new project and a new team, it is really good investment to allow some travel for those people to get together and meet face to face and get to know each other, even if thereafter, on a regular basis, they aren't able to meet together face to face.
Okay, so essentially meet at least once, depending on I guess it's measuring up the cost of the project and the cost of the travel and doing a quick cost-benefit analysis and saying, look, we need them to meet because they're going to be working together for the next, probably in pharma, for years. Yeah, exactly. In pharma, it's for years. And,
these project budgets over that time are going to be, £300 million or what have you. So, the medicine at the end of the day that goes to the patient is really important. So if you're going to invest that much amount of money on a project, a few flights for a few people to get together, it's not really that much.
Sure. In all the projects that you've worked on, the successful ones, is there one thing you could put your finger on to say it was one of the main reasons why they were successful?
That's a very good question. There's one project that springs to mind, actually. And it was a very successful project. It was a very quick project. It was one that had scientifically didn't have too many issues, so that helped. But the reason why it was such a good project was the way the project team worked together and the way the project manager held everybody together even under times of huge stress. And it was a team. It was definitely a high-performing team. There was a lot of trust in that team. There was a real understanding as to what they were trying to achieve and a real passion about delivering it together. Everybody helped each other out. It was a very supportive team. They worked very hard, but it was those people aspects, the way that team worked together, which was what made it most successful. Because the technology, the processes, the practices, the methodology and everything was common from that project and every other project in the company. But it was those team dynamics and those interpersonal skills that made the difference.
On the few that you may have been involved in that failed, is it just the opposite of that, or are there other reasons for failure?
In pharmaceuticals, it's very difficult, because generally if a project fails and is terminated, it's because of scientific reasons. So there may be something that looks really exciting, but once you get into the clinic, it just doesn't work in patients, or there could be safety issues when you get into the long-term toxicology, and that is often, so it's usually safety and efficacy which kills the project. So in terms of completely failing, it's usually a scientific, technical reason. I have seen a lot of projects that have been very much delayed, though, and that's the biggest issue within pharmaceuticals, is that the projects don't deliver in time. And that, of course, costs money, because time is money, and it's longer before you get the new medicine to the patients, and potentially competitors could get there before you. So that's the biggest issue in pharmaceuticals, which is delays rather than an outright failure. Now, why does that happen? Generally, it is around how the team communicates together, and this really comes into risk management. And risk management is very much about being open and honest and explaining where your concerns are, what could go wrong, and what have you. Scientists generally tend to be optimistic about things, which in some ways is a good thing, but it doesn't help with risk management, because that's where there's been a weakness in pharmaceuticals, and many industries have been a lot better. And pharmaceuticals have been learning from other industries to improve their operational risk management in terms of project delivery. And I think that's the biggest thing that needs further work, if you like, within pharmaceuticals. And the companies that are really good at that tend to have much more predictable delivery of the projects.
Okay. It's just a phenomenal and really, really intriguing industry. Projects, the life cycle of them in contrast to other industries, it's just phenomenal. And I think we can definitely take from your experience the importance of teams, interpersonal skills, getting that coffee machine conversation into the actual meeting, and be open and honest with everybody. Look, it's been really great, Pauline, having you on the call for the podcast. If people want to connect with you, where can they find you?
I'm on LinkedIn, so anybody can look me up on LinkedIn. Absolutely. And that's probably the best way to directly link, but I'm more than happy for people to email me and contact me and ask questions.
Great. Well, look, we'll include those details in the show notes, as we always do. And from everybody here at the Project Management Paradise podcast, thanks a million, Pauline, for being our guest today.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
Well, I think it's clear from that discussion that enabling people really does enable projects. You will find a link to Pauline's LinkedIn profile in the show notes at projectmanagementparadise.com/3. We'd also love an honest review and welcome feedback about this podcast at the same link. That's projectmanagementparadise.com/3. So thanks again for listening, and tune in again next week for another great guest.
Thanks for listening to the Project Management Paradise podcast at projectmanagementparadise.com.